Hello and welcome to the Revolut Insider Podcast, where we explore Revolut's rocket ship from the inside out, one episode at a time. I'm your host, Alex Carril, and joining me today is Michelle Muyunda, people partner focusing on diversity and inclusion here at Revolut. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Alex.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Great. Thank you for being here today.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Well, thanks for coming into the office. We're here in not so sunny London, but it's not raining, so that's a good day. It looks nice out.
Nice is a strong word, but yes.
Well, I'm really excited to get into what the goal of diversity and inclusion efforts are, and hopefully you can provide us some insights for companies about why they should build inclusive policies, and hopefully also give some advice to individuals on how they can make their voices heard in the workplace.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right, well, let's start with an overview. You know, when we talk about diversity initiatives in general, we usually hear the acronyms D&I or DEI. Can you explain what these letters mean, please, so we're all on the same page?
Sure. So diversity and inclusion, or diversity, equity and inclusion, which is what the E stands for, are really three different words that work in tandem. So diversity is simply talking about the difference, so the different people that you have in a workplace. Inclusion is talking about making those people feel welcome and feel that they can be themselves in an environment. And then equity is more about how you approach building that inclusion. So you take an equitable approach to ensuring that different groups feel welcome in the workplace. So yeah, those are what those words mean in terms of definition. We can get into a bit more what that means in terms of practice, actually, in a company.
Well, first, what do you think is the biggest misconception about D&I?
Sure. I would say that the biggest misconception is that D&I is a nice to have, or that it's an additional thing to a business, when in reality, diversity and inclusion and equity actually are all fundamentals and core principles in actually building any good business, building any good team, building any good structure. You have to diversify. You have to have different people, and those people have to feel included in order to make functioning teams and functioning departments.
Definitely. And you kind of touched on it, but why is it important for companies to have these clear, well-defined D&I policies in place?
Sure. So it's important because it's actually fundamental to productivity. Like, if you are going to be a productive company, you need to have a diverse team, and those teams need to feel included. So it's not just enough to have a team full of different types of people. You also have to make sure that those people feel welcome so that they can bring everything that they have, all their expertise, all their knowledge to the workplace. And the reason why it actually builds more productivity is because the more diverse a group is, we cover different areas of understanding, different areas of knowledge, and different perspectives. So you might have one problem that you can now solve in 5 different ways instead of 5 different people that solve the one problem in the same way.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And I'm sure from an employee point of view, having these policies in place are not just beneficial that they exist, but that they're well communicated as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. Because again, it's all great having a role like mine or having someone in the HR team or whichever team saying this is what we should do, but it really needs to be baked into everything that happens across the board. So not only does it need to be communicated well for the whole company, but it also needs to be embedded in how managers manage, how we promote, how we hire, how we do anything, to be honest, because like I said, it's a fundamental core part of doing business.
I love that. And can you tell us a bit about diversity here at Revolut?
Sure. So we're on a bit of a journey here at Revolut. It's a journey I'm excited to be on. We have a really good starting point in that we are inherently different. We have almost 100 different nationalities here at Revolut.
Wow.
I know, right? And I know that sounds like, oh, of course, because Revolut's a global company, you're going to have so many nationalities. We actually only function in just over 30 different countries.
Incredible.
So it's not like it's exactly reflective of how many countries we operate in. It is purely because there is so much diversity and so much difference in terms of where people come from. And yeah, it's really a good foundation of the fact that we embrace difference in people and we embrace hiring different types of people. We can go further and we will go further in terms of different types of elements of diversity and also how we don't just have all those different types of people, but we promote those different types of people. We train those different types of people to achieve different skill sets, because it's not just always about upward promotion, right? It's about growth in different ways. So right now we're doing great in terms of our nationality diversity. We want to expand that in terms of our gender and race and ethnicity and so on and so on.
And I know we have guilds here at Revolut that champion diversity. Can you tell us a little bit about them?
Sure, we have a number of guilds. So we have Rev Women, which is a guild that looks at gender parity and gender equality. We also have REACH, which is an acronym that stands for Race, Ethnicity and Cultural Heritage, which is looking at sort of equality amongst races and ethnicities and people from different backgrounds. As I mentioned, we have almost 100 different nationalities, so we want to make sure everyone feels included. We have the Pride Guild. It's for anyone that identifies as part of the LGBTQ plus community. We also have our Parents and Carers Guild, looking after our parents and carers, of course. And then we have our Impact Guild, which is our newest guild, and they are actually focusing on ESG efforts. So,
And for those that may not be familiar with the acronym ESG, could you break it down for us, please?
sure. So the acronym actually stands for Environmental, Social and Governance. But in terms of what the guild is doing, they're really making sure that they are focusing on how Revolut impacts the local environment, not just the environment, but socially as well. So one of their first points of call is looking at local schools and making sure that the people in our local area, in particular local to the London office, benefit from some of the skills that we have. So financial literacy and, career advancement and those types of things that they wouldn't necessarily have, because if anyone knows anything about the London office and the surrounding areas, that there are actually some less advantaged communities surrounding this area who might not have that type of access to that type of information. So that's the type of work that they work on, which is good because it's diversity and inclusion, but for the future. It's not just for right now, but it's building that pipeline of future engineers and salespeople and diversity and inclusion specialists.
It expands beyond the company, right? It expands outside into the community. And I like that when we have this community outreach, when we have this impact that is, like you said, continuous, and where we can see a longer term impact, not just for Revolut or for the company, but for the community in general. I think that's a great effort.
Yeah.
And from the guilds, I like being a part of these online communities because we all mostly work remotely. And I just like having this connection with team members all over the world, especially in my position where I'm getting to talk and interview people from different backgrounds and experiences. You really learn a lot.
Yes, I think that's also the key. You learn so much. And like you said, actually, we work remotely, we work globally. And so it's good to kind of connect with people that you might not necessarily be in your team, but you have a perspective of what life is like in Porto, for example.
Yeah. And beyond diversity, meaning, let's say you come from a different background, how does diversity truly help a company and contribute to building a dream team?
So this is where the different backgrounds usually means different perspectives. And this is where you have to be very careful, because just because somebody is a different gender or a different race or a different sexual orientation doesn't automatically make them different, but it can help. And it can help bring a perspective that you might not have to a solution. And so that is why it's so important. But it's also, like I think I touched on it earlier, it's about being able to problem solve in a more holistic way and a more in-depth way. We want to think deeper, right?
Yes.
So if you want to think deeper, you need more people who can bring a different idea, bring a different perspective. And also, if we think about our customer base is not homogenous. So neither should our company.
Exactly. And that gives way to, like you said, thinking deeper, gives way to innovation, to finding new solutions, and ultimately pick the best one because it's the best idea.
Yes, exactly. But you can't pick the best one if everyone has the same idea.
Exactly. What strategies do you recommend for encouraging this open dialogue and understanding among a diverse team?
It's actually something I was thinking about earlier, in that diversity, though I'm the biggest promoter, I would like to say, or should be at least, I have to be honest in that there are some growing pains when it comes to diversity. It can be much easier and much simpler to just work with people that you have an affinity with, that you understand. Maybe you speak the same language, maybe you have the same background. There's a shorthand that comes with that. But the benefits of diversity outweigh that comfort. And so it's similar to like as a company, if we want to grow, there are going to be literal growing pains. There are such things as diversity pains, but it's okay. And embracing that and being comfortable with being uncomfortable for a little bit, being comfortable with saying, I don't really get that. I don't really understand. That's new information to me. That I don't understand that perspective, but let's learn. Let's sit, let's have a conversation. And yeah, just being comfortable with being uncomfortable and not knowing and not having all the information for a little bit.
And I think it's a very easy issue, let's say, to overcome when you can ask respectful questions to gain perspective on how the other person thinks. So you can better understand not only the idea, but where they're coming from. So I think that gives you a better, like you said, holistic view to understand the idea that's being presented.
Yeah, exactly.
And do you have any advice on how someone who may feel like, let's say they're not getting the space to voice their opinion, what can they do to get their voice heard?
Oh, that's a good question because it depends. I think this is where a company with guilds is really helpful. There's power in numbers, and sometimes it's really good to be able to say, hey, I'm not the only person that thinks like this, and I'm not the only person that has this perspective. So there's power in numbers, number one. Number two, sometimes you kind of just have to stick your head above the parapet and just be like, hey, hey, I got something to say.
I love that.
Because it's important. And I think also understanding your value, understand that you aren't being a problem. I know there's a lot of stereotypes that people might fear are going to be attached to them, but it's more important, I believe, to express yourself and do it from a place of confidence of like, what I'm saying is valuable, what I'm saying is necessary, and it could actually be the voice that stops a really big problem.
Yeah.
I hope you don't mind. I have a quick story. It's from a book I read, and it was talking about how, and it's unfortunately quite a tragic story, but they were on it's a story about a plane that unfortunately crashed because there was a tech issue that could have been easily resolved, but because of this tech issue, they couldn't land.
Oh, wow.
Problem is, the engineer was watching the fuel go down and go down and go down. There was a risk balance. Should we just try and land anyway? Or should we hang about in the sky until we run out of fuel and the plane falls out of the sky?
Wow.
Because the engineer was so worried about saying, hey, we're running out of fuel, he just wanted to be like, well, the pilot says we've got to wait. He waited for the pilot to say, well, we've got to wait. And unfortunately, the plane ended up crashing because they ran out of fuel.
Wow.
And it comes from that thing of people don't want to open up and say because they don't think that their voice is important, or they think that somebody else's voice is more important. Maybe they're more senior. Maybe they've been here longer. Maybe, I don't know, whatever the things that we come up with in our head are. But it's really important to say, no matter where you sit, if you see a problem, if you see something where you're thinking, that doesn't quite make sense for maybe people like me or my community or whatever, say something.
Exactly.
Please.
Please, yeah. That's why I feel so empowered to be at Revolut, because there isn't this disconnect between seniorities. Slack makes it so easy to reach out to anybody and voice your opinions. I feel that is part of the culture here at Revolut.
Yeah, I agree. In my very first few weeks of being here, I was like, oh, by the way, there's a thing over here that we should probably think about doing differently. And everyone just went, okay, sure.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that was easy.
If you have a reason behind it and makes sense, people are willing to listen, and not only to listen, but to act on it. Well, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with more Insider Views. This podcast is brought to you by Revolut Donations. Did you know you could use your Revolut app to make a charitable donation? Choose from a huge selection of charities and effortlessly donate money with a tap. Charities get 100% of your donation, so you can feel good knowing that your whole contribution goes straight to the cause you care about. Do some good with Revolut. And we're back here on the Revolut Insider Podcast with Michelle Muyunda, People Partner and Diversity and Inclusion Specialist.
Hello.
How are you doing so far?
I'm good. This has been fun.
Michelle, I want to know a little bit more about you. Is that okay?
Sure.
How did you find yourself in the D&I space?
Well, probably like a lot of people, I stumbled into it. So I had big legal dreams. I was going to be I was going to be a lawyer, but not just be a lawyer. I was going to be the Olivia Pope of lawyers.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Oh, yeah. With the
Scandal.
bags. Yeah. With the bags and the coats and everything. But anyway, so I did my undergrad, did law, very quickly realized I am not supposed to be here. I am, but I felt like I was not supposed to be there. And needed to do something because there was no way I was telling my parents, oh yeah, I'm coming to law school, but not really doing law, but don't know what else I'm doing. So I had to come up with a plan B very quickly. Figured out, what am I good at? Well, I'm good at talking. I ended up finding a graduate scheme in recruitment. And at that point, I did not live in London, and I knew I wanted to live in London. And this graduate recruitment scheme was in London. So I said, cool, guys. Hi, parents. I'm moving to London. They were like, okay, we'll see you in a year. That was many years ago. So yeah, I went ahead and I did that for just under a year. And then I moved into internal recruitment. So that's when I started to get into understanding a bit more about HR, because the internal recruitment team sat within an HR function. And as I was learning more about recruitment, I started learning about recruitment marketing. I went into a job that was employer branding. So there was a bit of recruitment marketing in that. And as I was sort of marketing this company and, you know, talking about how great and diverse we were, I was thinking, hey, we kind of have a bit more work to do on that diversity internally before I go out and tell everybody how great it is. So I started to focus my efforts internally on some of the diversity that we could do actually as a company. And that's when I was like, actually, I like this part of my job. And that's when I became D&I specialist. Or, well, I didn't come as a specialist overnight, but I started to go down that route of D&I. And that's how I ended up in this field.
And can I ask you, what you had mentioned that you didn't feel like law school was the right place for you? How come?
Yeah, so I come from a very basic, comprehensive state school in the UK, not very well funded. You know, you kind of just get on with it. And when I went to university, people either went to grammar schools or they went to private schools. They basically went to schools that had much more information, funding, teaching, tutoring, specific tutoring. I'll give you an example. To go to the university that I went to, you had to do this test called the LNAT.
Okay.
I think it's something like Legal National Aptitude Test or something like that. And I just Googled it. I was like, Google, help me.
What?
And I went
This is before ChatGPT.
Oh, yeah. I was just like, help. What do I do? So I Googled it. I went and did the test. Somehow, miraculously, I passed the test. When I went to university, they were like, I had friends that were like, oh, I'm so glad I don't have to do those LNAT tutoring sessions anymore. I was like, what? What do you mean? And, you know, they went to schools where they were molded to become the future lawyers, molded to become future minds. They just kind of, in my school, wanted to make sure you did something. And so that disconnect, I felt like I was about 2 or 3 years behind my colleagues, which is sad. But I think that's where that almost imposter syndrome came from. Like, oh, everyone else really knows what they're doing and I'm just figuring it out. So yeah, I had a bit of imposter syndrome, felt like I was behind everyone. But that experience is what helped me later down the line when I started to get into diversity. I felt really equipped to go into schools, local schools. I'd moved to London by this point, and going to local state schools and talking to them and encouraging them and being like, look, you're good, like you're not behind, you can be a lawyer, don't be me. Don't talk yourself out of it because everybody else seems way ahead of you. They're not ahead of you. You are just as important. You are just as valuable in these spaces. So
yeah, in these spaces where you can take up space, right? Because I feel like sometimes, even myself included, you know, you feel like this is a big space, but where is my place here, right? And I think it's about this confidence to know that you have just as much right as anybody else to take up your space.
Yes. Exactly. And I know a lot of people, well-meaning, have been told that, like, you know, maybe because of their race, because of their gender, things are going to be harder for them. And I understand why people older than them or people around them have told them that, right? But I'm also keen to flip that on its head and be like, actually, it's likely you're going to be the only so-and-so in a room. And that's good because that means you're the only person with your perspective in that room. And so you are indispensable in that room because of that.
And I think that goes with what you were saying before about that problem-solving experience where you can go into this space, know that your perspective is different, and have the confidence to share those ideas because you are the only one that has that perspective.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
What's been your biggest takeaway so far while working in this field?
Oh, I think back to that point of how integral it is to business. I think even somebody who would have benefited from diversity and inclusion policies before I got into this field felt like it was very much the extra, the nice to have on top. But when you actually get here and you realize, hang on a second, marketing needs to think about diversity. Obviously, HR has to think about diversity. But even small things like the accessibility of an app, all of those things have to consider diversity and inclusion. And that has probably been my biggest takeaway, that it is crucial, I cannot say it enough, crucial to business function.
And what's been the experience with students that you've had these talks with or other people you've come into contact with when sharing about diversity and bringing their own perspectives to the table?
Yeah, so I do think that a lot of people don't know the power of their diversity. They know potentially what might hold them back because of their diversity, but they don't understand that that is a benefit to them and is a benefit to a company. And so one of the things that I have made it my personal mission to do, especially with younger people, is, like I said, though they are hyper aware of their difference, making sure that they know how to bring that to the table, because a lot of them don't understand how to bring it to the table, or they have been taught to try and assimilate and try and get rid of that difference. And I'm like, no, don't do that. Bring it all, bring it everything, because it's beneficial.
Do you have any advice for people that might be in that mindset of how to relearn these values that they've instilled in themselves, or how to break out of that to assert their place at work or anywhere, really?
Yeah, stop it. No, but stop it, because first of all, it takes a lot of effort to try and be someone you are not. It takes a lot of effort. Anecdotally, I can tell you of some training that we did a while back. And essentially, we were given a task to explain what we did at the weekend, which is basic workplace conversation. What did you do at the weekend? But as you tell that story, you're not allowed to mention anyone's gender. You're not allowed to mention anyone's pronouns. You're not allowed to mention any place names. To have a conversation and be like, I went here with a person and did a thing, like, is so tiring in your brain. And the training was essentially to show how difficult it is for people to mask who they are. In this context, it was for LGBTQ plus people to mask their gender identity or the gender identity of those around them, or their own sexual orientation or that of those around them. But it also applies to cultural differences, you know, not being able to say, maybe I went to this religious festival, or maybe not feeling comfortable to say I went to church on Sunday.
Yeah.
Little things like that can really hurt someone's ability to connect and someone's ability to bring their whole selves, and it is a drain on their mental capacity. And that is not what you want when you want, like I said, when you want a company with people that think deeper. If they're spending too much time thinking about what they can and can't say, that is not good. So 2 things. 1, bring your whole self, but also people should develop an ability to hear and listen to people and accept, and don't make assumptions about what people are about to say. It's more of a wider issue, right? So I've had a good experience of being able to do that here since I've joined, tell people what I'm doing, what I did at the weekend in its fullness and in all its glory. But as a wider issue, people might have their own perceptions and their own feelings that they can't do that. And I want to free them from that weight and that burden.
Break down those walls.
Build
relationships.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that goes not just with your team members, right? But also with external relationships. Like, if you're in sales, or, you know, I was in banking before when I lived in LA. And I mean, to be able to have these conversations with your clients, feel comfortable and confident of what you're saying and who you're talking about and using the correct pronouns, you feel empowered. I feel like that's where business is formed.
Yeah.
When you can have these relationships that are genuine relationships, and they're deepened by knowing who these people are, right? Who are you doing business with? And I think when you can be your authentic self and come to work like Revolut, not only your employees shine, but the business grows and the business is successful as well.
Exactly. And it is that key part about building relationships. You can't build relationships with people who you don't know.
Yeah. And, you know, there are some people that think, well, what you do in your personal life is your business. What would you say to those who feel like there should be a separation between, let's say, work life and personal life?
I get it. But I do. And that is the part of diversity. Some people are going to be like, respectfully, I don't want to tell you everything that happened. And some people won't. I think the issue is where you feel like you can't.
Yeah.
That's the problem. Where you feel like I'm incapable of saying this to you because of potential repercussions of what I'm about to say. That is a problem. I would encourage you not to do that. Yeah. I would encourage you to be more open, but I understand reasons why people don't. It's also sometimes just a generational thing that I've noticed. Gen Z love a good chin wag. and maybe like younger millennials love to tell you absolutely everything. And some older generations just don't. And that's okay. But again, it shouldn't feel like if I tell you this is detrimental to our work, this is detrimental to my progression, this is detrimental to my hiring. None of that should be the norm or the feeling in business at all.
Exactly. And building on that, how can companies or coworkers foster a more inclusive work environment?
I think the key is always empathy, building an understanding and an empathetic approach to the workplace environment, right?
Definitely.
So understanding that you have hired people, not machines.
Yeah.
You've hired people, not machines. And when you think about it from that perspective and you have the empathy of the fact, okay, this is a person sat across from me. How can I connect with that person, right? Rather than what can I get out of that person?
Exactly.
And those connections help people buy in, help people be more engaged, help people feel like they belong. At the end of the day, we all belong. So I want Revolut to succeed just as much as anybody else does because I'm part of everything that is Revolut.
Exactly. And I think that goes with our motto of Dream Team. And I think the Dream Team is not just getting work done, but it's about being your authentic self to get the work done.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're almost out of time, but I just have one more question for you, Michelle. What advice would you have given yourself or would have liked to hear when you were just starting out in your career?
Oh, baby Michelle, calm down. Calm down. I had a lot of anxiety at the beginning of my career, partially to do with what I'm explaining about that imposter syndrome and about not knowing. I felt like, oh my gosh, I don't know the answer to things. This is awful. So, I just told myself, girl, it's okay.
Give yourself a break. Yeah.
Yeah, just calm down. Ask questions as well.
I love that. Well, thank you so much, Michelle. I really appreciate you being here today and really giving us a quick masterclass in the importance of diversity.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome anytime. And thanks for listening today. You can add the podcast to your favorites so you don't miss an episode and follow us on Instagram at Revolut Insider. Thanks for tuning in to the Revolut Insider Podcast, where we explore Revolut's rocket ship from the inside out. Until next time, remember, the sky's not the limit, it's just the beginning. Revolut. Change the way you money.